leader of B2B procurement. Okay? It has grown from a home-based Singapore business to something that's 100 million in merchants and still growing, and has grown from a Singapore-based to Japan, Australia, and also US, right? And more to come. Okay. All right, so Chavi has given us an emerging trend on what's happening in the B2B world, as well as some imperatives that the business has to look out for, and also some insights of what Visa is doing and addressing these things. I'd like to turn it over to Jian Min and also to Tas on your organization. What are you doing to helping your ecosystem, your clients, and what benefits does that bring to you?
Yeah. So thank you very much to Visa and Citibank for inviting me on stage. I think it's a great privilege to be speaking to a lot of professionals and experienced people in procurement, in banking, financial institutions, and payments as well. So I think over the last couple of hours, we've heard a lot of digital payments, technologies coming up, whether from startups outside, whether from established players in the market. For SourceSage, we are relatively still a very young and small player compared to a lot of giants outside, right? I guess. And for us, we started this business in 2015. After I graduated from Oxford and Princeton, I came up with the idea that, okay, in the entire procurement space or B2B space, a lot of people are struggling, with long tail spend management, right? That typically takes 20% of the budget, but more often than not, 80% of the time for procurement individuals to deal not only from a payment side, but you talk about onboarding of small value vendors. You talk about maintaining their catalogs, and I guess many of the procurement professionals here today would agree to the fact that a lot of time can actually be spent more on strategic sourcing or the higher value added stuff, right, for the suppliers. So in 2015, we started with the idea: what if we could actually combine a lot of that catalogs and investments into the catalogs or B2C platforms or B2B marketplaces today, and then present as a multi-catalog system that's integrated to the ERP solutions for companies, right? So we are talking about SAP, Coupa, GEP, and many other large procurement platforms outside, which typically doesn't really take the counterparty risk in between sellers and buyers. And today, SourceSage is really a one-stop shop. We call it a one-approved creditor model, where we actually manage payments in between the buyers and the suppliers. And of course, by having a consolidated reporting and billing and so on. And we're proud to have MNCs including DHL, Citi, and many others, right, including TikTok today, who actually uses our system for managing their long tail spend across the entire APAC, where we have presence in China, in Japan, in Australia, India, and the rest of Southeast Asia, including United States on the west as well. Yeah.
Tas, would you like to add?
Yeah, I mean, what an accomplishment. So from Citi's perspective, I think it's very easy for me to sit here and talk about virtual cards and we've done, but we've covered all of that in the previous panels. I think the perspective I want to say is how is Citi helping with this discussion is we're enabling these partners to come together, right? So if you look at what SourceSage is covering, if you talk about what Soma covered from a BNPO perspective, from Open Fabric, if you look at Confirma and what they're doing, Citi's privileged to have all of these connectivities and partners that we see across the industry, because we're not just a commercial cards issuer. The ability that we have across our transactional business allows us access to these fintechs and these enablers. So a lot of what we're doing is not only digitizing and enabling our product, but also making these connections. And when we talk about flows, we're not just talking about the use of the card as a method of payment. We're looking at the end-to-end journey. Everything from when the buyer needs to make that payment, why they need to make it, all the way through to the supplier accepting it, and even the data that goes back. So in relation to this specific topic, I think we are trying to be the enabler and making sure that our partners come together to get the best value proposition for all concerned stakeholders.
So Chavi, Visa is a network of networks. Enabling of issuers is key. But increasingly, we are also enabling the ecosystem. Can you share with us how we have collaborated with our partners, create a win-win-win situation for all?
Sure. That's my favorite question oftentimes. And the reason for that is, I think Karen, you rightly said, our philosophy is to be a network of networks. What does that mean? That means that we want to be able to provide connectivity to all endpoints. We see ourselves as an ecosystem player. Our primary aim is to provide solutions that are efficient and make payments more efficient for all ecosystem players, be it buyers, who in this case will be corporates or small businesses, be it the end suppliers, but also more importantly, and without doubt, having our banking partners is obviously the backbone, but also importantly, in engaging and connecting with a whole range of fintech players that are in the B2B space. We completely understand that we may not be building everything in-house. Our strategy will definitely be partner with a lot of players. We had some interesting thumbs up and thumbs down in the last session, where there were things like AI and AI-based commerce. And that's an area where we definitely are partnering. We have things like crypto. And while it might take a while for it to kind of advent into the B2B space, it's obviously very important as we think about DCDP and digital currencies. So for us, I think any player or any entity that we can partner with that will help bring any kind of efficiency to make payments more seamless globally is our focus.
Absolutely. So I want to turn over to data. It's probably the most used word today, right? So I want to ask Jian Min and also to Tas on your digital journey. I'm looking at Vince again from KTech. He's telling me that there is some signals in the noise of data. So perhaps Jian Min and Tas, if you can tell us that digital journey, and Jian Min, for you, you started as data as a service. What does that mean, and how has that evolved to be relevant today?
Maybe I can answer first. So for us, actually, and thanks for sharing. I think all successful companies, even for the future, will become some sort of aggregator, right? Whether on the network side, whether on fostering collaboration and technologies. Because even for long tail span, we don't see technologies as the end itself. It's often a means to an end. We sometimes have to piece together different technologies in order to solve the pain point of our end users, which are the procurement folks, or even end users within the companies who actually manages a small value buys, right? For us, SourceSage is fortunate to start off as a data service company because we actually aggregate data, analyze the commodity data across different platforms, understanding at times it might be cheaper to buy COVID test kits from one platform versus the other, and sometimes one supply source may run out of stocks on certain products. So how do we actually de-risk the supply chain by having an aggregation of different channels, or suppliers, or even e-commerce marketplace today? And we are talking about the likes of Lazada, Shopee, FairPrice, and even Amazon. In the case of Singapore, in Japan, you have Monotaro, you have Rakuten, you have Amazon Business as well, right? In India, you have Flipkart, and so on and so forth. So for us, data really means the ability to really create value for our clients, and that means not just from a price or cost saving standpoint, but we could actually get more insights to allow our end users or purchasers to actually perform their tasks better on top of our platform, where they can actually see that on certain days, right, their users could actually be consolidating their deliveries to reduce logistic costs, right? So SourceSage is providing a lot of cost savings report and insights in that regard beyond our platform.
Has anything else to add from a financial institution's perspective?
Yeah, touched on a lot of great points there. For me, when we talk about data, it's going to have to be items around relevance, right? And then the understanding of that data. So Citi in itself, for a B2B journey, has gone through a lot of change. When we speak with our clients, we don't just approach them about a product anymore. It's a data-driven discussion. What do I mean by that? We look at our clients' payments data, we look at where they're spending and how relevant our proposition might be in that space. It's not just a question of acceptance, it's just understanding our client's business. Then we're able to tailor our products and services. So if you take virtual cards, Josh mentioned earlier in the panel that virtual cards has the capability of having 29 custom data fields. But what does that really mean for our clients if we don't make it relevant, right? In terms of what data elements do they need to capture, why they need to do it for different flows. And then we've got the partners such as SourceSage or any of the other ones I've mentioned, and how they play a point in that. So I think a lot of what we're doing is trying to understand it and walk our clients through the data and what it's showing us and have a conversation about that and getting their perspective, because I think in the past, we might have been more just on an issuer's perspective. I think in order to succeed in the B2B journey, we have to understand multiple stakeholders and how they look at the data and what's relevant for them, and that's been an eye-opening experience.
If I can add on just one point, which is inspiring. For us, actually, a specific example would be today, if you have a commercial card or card to transact on a B2C platform, maybe you're just buying something ad hoc for your company, right? And you would like to extract a tax invoice or even some kind of report. You can't really do that, on a B2C platform like Lazada or even Shopee. So the role of data becomes really important, for B2B companies or MNCs, especially because they do value the compliance, the processes, right? And so we see our role really fitting into the gaps where MNC will be looking at data from a more compliance standpoint, where all these things comes in together from multiple stakeholders in the ecosystem.
And data comes from everybody, right? From the buyers, from the financial institutions, from Visa, but also from the merchants and suppliers. So maybe I can turn the last question to Chavi and also Jian Min on how do we engage suppliers then? I know the panels before talked about having a win-win situation for both sides of the coin. So how do we support the merchants?
I think as an industry, for us, if we have to be successful, the merchants or the suppliers play a very critical role. They are equally important from the perspective that they are the receiving entity of the payment. It's got to make sense for them from a ease of receiving payment, from the data that payment carries, and the cost of payments. A couple of things that we are very focused on as a network is thinking through and working with our merchant partners and our acquiring partners on what is it that will really help drive acceptance for B2B payments. Those can be in the form of economics, or it can be in the form of better data, or it can be in the form of better solutions. The other piece that we're focused on is working with other fintech partners that can drive acceptance for us. So very popular trend is how do we draw down from a card account and pay into the bank account of a supplier if that supplier is not a card accepting merchant, because a lot of times both entities may want to accept a card payment, but we do know that it may take time to set up that infrastructure for acceptance. And that's where working with our fintech partners, or we have a model called the Business Payment Solution Provider model, which is an aggregator model, can help that. Because essentially they can be the, kind of the aggregator in the middle who can help ensure that the payments can be made from the buyer to the supplier and carry the data, as well as ensure that the end-to-end process from the PO to the invoice, to the payment, to the reconciliation happens. My view is that both have to work in parallel, because we know that we have to solve a lot in the B2B acceptance world, but it's absolutely important and critical. And we have specific teams that are working on this, both not just on the consumer acceptance side, but increasingly dedicated on the B2B acceptance side.
Yeah. So for me, I guess I can quote Steve Jobs over here, which is, sometimes you can't connect the dots by looking forward. You have to look backwards to connect the dots. And I think a lot of time, energy, resources have been spent over the many years, over maybe perhaps 20 over years, especially in the travel space, right? When cards or even issuers try to convince the airlines, the different players in the ecosystem to accept cards, right? And then of course there's the advent of Expedia, right? Which is the online travel aggregator when they first started off. And today they're more than just B2C, they're B2B, they sold off their B2B arm as well and all that. And in our case, actually what we see as happening from an aggregation standpoint is that many of these marketplaces eventually will establish their B2B arm, right? Either from card acceptance angle, and many of these e-commerce platforms are really playing the role of becoming the intermediary, right? So for SourceSage, I think we see our role very much as the aggregator of aggregators, right? In short, just like the networks, and we very well could be well positioned, to solve the pain point happening in the procurement space right now, and even for the future, where many of the suppliers who may not be card accepting, and maybe there are thousands of them, in the market right now, or even millions of suppliers, where SourceSage could actually be but one vendor model to accept cards and then split payments to thousands or even millions of suppliers in a more automated fashion using Citi and Visa.
Okay, we are flashing amber here for 90 seconds here. Question from the Slido. Not all digitization, or should I say digitalization, there's two different meanings to this word, right? Are successful. 30 seconds, if you can just tell the panel, the audience here, what does it take to win? What are the success factors?
I'm going to defer to my very esteemed colleague to answer this question.
I guess as an entrepreneur and startup, ourselves, today we are still, starting up in different countries, right, as a young company, in different regions and subsidiary, in new markets, including in China as well. I would say that it goes back to square one every time we start a new market or even subsidiary, where we have to be really determined to find different ways where we can actually solve the pain point of our customers. I think digitization is more than just technology, it's actually customer and people-centric. Right? I think one of the famous quotes from Amazon, Jeff Bezos, which happens to be from Princeton as well, we heard him one time at the reunion, was that they are obsessed about customers' experience. Right? And I think it takes a lot of work to really understand that meaning and ultimately to give it your best to, not just from technology standpoint, from customer service standpoint, all angles, to ensure that whatever projects or digitalization projects that you're implementing can actually stand a chance to be successful for our clients.
I couldn't agree with you more. I'm not as articulate, but I will say that there are two things. One, I think there is a level of education that is still needed. We see all aspects of the transaction and all the players, and there's still some myth, so to speak, or lack of awareness on the benefits of digitization as well as card payments. The second, I think absolutely agree, is it's not a one-size-fits-all. I think I mentioned that one has to go really deep, and hence our approach on looking at specific industry verticals. I talked about healthcare previously, or e-commerce, or government type of payments, or travel. They all have very different pain points. And I think it's very important for us to think through what are those pain points for different industries, and how do we solve for them, either ourselves or in partnership with our financial institutions.
Okay, we are blasting red only because we're in between your lunch. So just to sum up this panel discussion, if I can give you 3 takeaways. First, digitization of digital payments, if I have to put it from a payments perspective, is here to stay. Stats shows that 83% of B2B companies wants to do that digitally, which means merchants and sellers have to change the way they sell from an experience perspective, and buyers and corporates are expecting more from an end-to-end perspective. Second, data, again, signal in the noise. Where's that noise and where's the signals that we need to find out, right? And finally, in terms of card perspective, virtual cards here to stay. We see some 6.8 trillion in terms of growth by 2026, according to Mercator Analytics. So we're going to see more in that space. So with that, I'd like to thank the audience, and perhaps during lunch we can catch hold of them as well. So thank you very much.
So guys, thank you so much. Before everyone breaks for lunch, I am the guy